Now, what is going on, everyone? Today, I'm super happy to announce the start of a new tutorial series. And this time around, we are going to take a look at how to test your Node application with Docker Compose. And let me just explain what I mean by that. So typically what you have is you have your server, say you have an Express server, and this server is talking to your database. So it can be any database. In our case, it's just Postgres, but it could also be MySQL, Mongo, whatever you want to use. And typically the way you test is you have your test script, which is called npm. So you run npm test, and then this thing is going to execute the test you specified with the test runner, and then it's going to stop the database interaction out. So that means you're using something like sign-in, or you're using something like proxy query to kind of abstract the database away from you, because dealing with a real database can be a little bit hard, right? But that is exactly also a downside, because the issue is that you are not really testing against the real thing. And this can lead to a lot of issues, because you want to test as close to reality as possible, because otherwise you just deploy it and then it's not going to work, and you're like, oh, but why is it not working? My stopped interactions work, right? And so it actually makes a lot of sense to run your tests against a real database. And this is exactly what we're going to do. But our setup will be a little bit different, or our flow will be different. So let me just explain. What we want to do is, if you type in npm test, what we're going to do is we're going to reach out to Docker. We're going to pull a Docker image, like a Postgres Docker image, and we're going to start a Postgres database on the fly within a Docker container. And then once we have this thing up and running, we're going to set up our database schema. So we're going to run some SQL. And then once everything is set up, we are going to execute all our tests. So we are going to have some test runner like Mocha or Jest, which is going to hit our server. And then we're going to execute the tests against the real database, not against the mock version, but against the real database. And then once all of this is done, we're going to display the test results, and we're going to throw away this Postgres container, this database container, because we no longer need it anymore. And if we do it like this, we have the advantage that we are testing against a real database, which is closer to a real world scenario. So we can have a way higher confidence that if we deploy this thing, that it's actually going to do what we expect it to do. And there's also a couple of other acceptance criteria, so to say, that I came up with. So for one, we want npm test to behave as described above. So that's the first thing. And another thing is, we not only want to run our tests against a database running inside a Docker container, but of course we also want to be able to run our tests against a Postgres instance that is running locally. So our project somehow has to support this. Sometimes we're going to use the Docker container, sometimes we won't. Probably if we are in development, we're going to use the local database. But then if we if you run this stuff on a CI/CD system, then of course you make use of Docker. And since we are using Docker Compose, one additional requirement that I have, in addition to this npm test and to this local testing thing, is that if you have no clue whatsoever about this application, and you just open it up and you run Docker Compose up, then I want the entire application to be started. So that means we need to start a web server, which is just our Express application, and we need to start this Docker container for Postgres. And then everything should be started with Docker Compose, and then technically you could use this thing. So this is super handy because you don't care about usernames, passwords, anything that you need to install. You just run Docker Compose up and that's it. Cool. So that is one thing. And what else do we have? I think we want to provide in general, like a very easy way of covering like all the use cases I just mentioned. So for one, we want to run locally, of course, because we will need to do that while we are developing. We want to test locally, but we also want to test with Docker, as I just mentioned. And we also expect that if we run Docker Compose up, that the entire thing is like started and that the entire thing is ready to use. And this setup here, like it kind of is related to Node, but it's more like a DevOps approach. So this is like an advanced test setup that we're like doing. So typically you have a more basic setup. Now this one is going to be a little bit trickier to do. It's not super crazy complicated, but it is a little bit more work. But then you can test against a real database and you have higher confidence in that it will actually work out. Yeah, so that's it pretty much for the introduction. I think we can directly jump into actually coding all of this. So thank you very much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up if you're excited about the series. I hope to see a lot of you guys around in the next videos. And if you have a question, just leave me a comment. You can also reach out to me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @productioncoder. And also I've set up an email list. So if you guys want to have a say in what we cover next on this channel, if you want to see a particular topic, then you can just sign up for this email list. And then every once in a while, I'm going to send an email along. So again, guys, thank you very much for watching and I'll see you in the next videos.